Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Your support helps us bring more wild stories to life. The sun hung heavy over the dusty Arizona landscape, casting long shadows that stretched across the parched land. Elias Harper rode slowly along the tracks, the endless desert surrounding him with nothing but the heat and the memory of years spent running. A cowboy by trade, Elias was no stranger to the rough life of cattle drives, dusty trails, and the harsh isolation of the frontier. His past was haunted by the deaths of his wife and son, taken by fever long ago, and since then he had chosen a life of a drifter, moving from place to place, never staying too long, never letting anyone get close. The ground under his horse's hooves was cracked, dry, and indifferent. As Elias rode through the wilderness, his mind wandered, but it was the sight of a woman that pulled him back into the moment. A woman sitting by a half-buried post, her back straight, her eyes focused on the horizon. Her dress was worn and torn, her hands marked with the signs of hard labor. But what struck him most was the weariness in her posture, the heavy weight of rejection that seemed to follow her like a shadow. Elias slowed his horse, his heart heavy with the kind of understanding that only comes from a shared kind of pain. He knew what it was to be abandoned, to be left with nothing but the silence of a world that had no place for you. The woman, her name was Ta, didn't look at him at first. She was too familiar with the kind of men who passed by, men who offered nothing but judgment. But Elias didn't come to judge. He dismounted and took out his canteen. Without a word, he sat beside her, offering the water without any conditions. The look in her eyes was not one of trust, but of cautious acceptance. She drank, slow and measured, as if the act itself was a form of survival. Elias didn't push, didn't ask. He simply sat beside her, aware of the way the world had torn them both apart. "My name's Elias," he said quietly, his voice low and steady. She looked at him then, and for the first time there was no anger in her eyes, only a weary recognition of someone who had lived through enough to know what it meant to be left behind. "T," she replied, the word simple but filled with weight. The silence between them was thick, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence that two people who had known hardship shared, a quiet understanding that sometimes words only made things worse. Elias didn't want responsibility. He had learned long ago that getting too close meant opening yourself to hurt. But seeing her sitting there, lost and alone in the world, made something inside him shift. He couldn't leave her like this. He couldn't walk away from the kind of abandonment he had seen too many times before. So, with a deep breath, he made a decision to offer her what he could: a place to stay, a meal, a bed for the night. He motioned to his horse, urging her to follow. "Come on," he said, his tone soft but firm. "I have a cabin not far." T hesitated for a moment, her body stiff with the weight of distrust. But the road behind her was filled with nothing but silence and hardship. So she followed. Slowly, stiff in the hours spent under the sun, she climbed onto the horse behind him, her body rigid but determined. As they rode together, the land stretched endlessly around them, barren and unforgiving. The evening sun cast long shadows on the ground as Elias led the horse toward the small cabin he had built years ago, a simple structure made from pine boards, patched with tar paper, and a stone chimney that leaned but still held strong. It was a humble place, but it was a home. When they arrived, Elias dismounted and offered his hand to help her down. She hesitated but accepted, her legs shaking from exhaustion. The cabin was small, its interior simple. A bed, a table, a few dishes, enough for one man to live quietly, though now it would be enough for two. Elias lit a lamp, poured her a cup of water, and set it down before her. T's hand shook slightly as she reached for it, the cracks in her palms from years of hard labor evident in the dim light. She hadn't expected comfort, but she found it here in the silence, in the steady rhythm of Elias's actions. The evening passed quietly. T ate, her eyes on the food, but her mind heavy with questions. Why had he taken her in? What did he want from her? Elias said little, his movements deliberate, but he didn't push her for answers. She could feel the weight of his past in the way he held himself, in the way he seemed to carry the quiet strength of someone who had endured more than his fair share of loss. That night, Elias gave her the bed. He slept by the fire, his back against the wall, his mind replaying the decisions that had led him here. He had sworn never to let anyone get too close again, but something about tea had made him break that vow. As he lay there, staring into the fire, he realized that sometimes survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about giving someone else a chance to do the same. The days that followed settled into a rhythm. Elias worked the land, fixing fences and tending to cattle, while T helped around the cabin. She cooked, she cleaned, she carried water from the well, all without complaint, all without asking for anything in return. The silence between them grew comfortable, and though neither spoke much, both felt the quiet bond that was growing between them. But the world outside their small cabin was never far away. There were whispers in the town, rumors about T, about her worth, about what she couldn't give. Elias knew it. He had heard the talk. He had lived through enough gossip in his life to know that people always had something to say about others who didn't fit their idea of what was acceptable. One day, a group of men came to cabin. They rode slowly, their eyes fixed on Elias as they approached. The first man spoke, his voice dripping with disdain. "Heard you got yourself a woman who can't give you anything but trouble." Elias's eyes didn't leave the man's face. He had heard worse before. He had seen men come to town with knives in their hands and anger in their hearts. But this time, it wasn't about violence. It was about something quieter, something more dangerous. He didn't raise his voice, didn't pull a gun. He simply looked at the man, his jaw set, and said, "You're wrong. She's not a burden. She's a part of this place now, and you'll show her the same respect you show me." The men didn't argue. They saw the fire in Elias's eyes, the steady strength that had carried him through years of hardship. They turned, their boots scraping the dirt, and left without another word. Inside, T sat still, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't look at him, but Elias knew what she was feeling. He knew what it was like to have the world judge you, to have people decide your worth before they knew you. But he had made his decision. She was here now, and he wasn't going to let anyone take that from her. He walked over to her, and for the first time, he saw the faintest glimmer of something in her eyes. Hope. "You're here, and that's enough," Elias said quietly. And in that moment, for both of them, it was